Your Excellency, Greek Consul General Yannis Malakotis, members, friends and colleagues, good evening and welcome to the Chak Wing Museum. My name is Paul Donnelly, I'm the Deputy Director of the museum. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge we're on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. The museum which we are meeting tonight sits within a landscape that for millennia has been a place of teaching, sharing and learning. Welcome to the 2023 Nicholson Lecture. This is an event when we celebrate Sir Charles Nicholson's foresight in establishing antiquity and collections as a fundamental part of the student experience here at the University of Sydney. The date chosen is not random. Today is Sir Charles Nicholson's birthday, born today in 1808, 215 years ago. So a round of applause for Charles Nicholson. We are quite sure Sir Charles would have approved of celebrating this event by inviting eminent scholars from museums around the world to share their research and experiences. This year, we're most fortunate to have Dr. Anastasia Christophilopoulou talk to us tonight. In hosting Dr. Christophilopoulou, we would like to acknowledge the generosity of the Hellenic Lyceum Sydney and the Cyprus Community Club. Both have hosted events for Anastasia during the week, and we thank their representatives for being with us tonight. A shout out to CWM members and the Australian Archaeological Institute of Athens, represented by Dr. Stavros Paspalas tonight. A little bit about our speaker. Anastasia is a senior curator, ancient Mediterranean of the Fitzwilliam Museum, Cambridge, UK. She is responsible for research and exhibition projects and permanent displays in the fields of Greek, Cypriot and Roman collections. Anastasia gained her PhD in classical archaeology in 2008 at the Faculty of Classics, Cambridge, and from 2009 to 2010 was a postdoctoral researcher at the Topoi Excellence Cluster, Free Universität Berlin, after which she joined the Fitzwilliam Museum. She's also lectured for the University of London, Birkbeck College, and is currently an external collaborator to two interdisciplinary research networks in Cyprus and Germany. She is currently leading the 4-year research project, Being an Islander, Art and Identity of the Large Mediterranean Islands, aiming to critically re-examine the concept of island life through material culture. The project will culminate in a large exhibition at the Fitzwilliam Museum, displaying finds and artworks from the islands of Cyprus, Sardinia and Crete. Having a talk to Anastasia over the last few days, it was really lovely to hear how, when at the BSA, she would sit next to our own Alexander Cambidoglu, when she was a slip of a girl doing her master's in Athens. And of course, he was, as we would remember him, a very eminent and urbane and I think gentleman, very elegant gentleman in his white linen suit. So it's lovely to have those good demonstrations of this kind of interconnections that we share in this world. Anastasia's 2023 Sir Charles Nicholson Lecture presents the journey of an interdisciplinary research and engagement project. It focuses on tracing insular identities of the large islands of the Mediterranean, particularly Cyprus, Sardinia and Crete. These 3 islands are notable for their size and strong indigenous cultural traditions. They demonstrate complex transitions developing between prehistoric to historic cultures and significant restructuring of their social and political systems within the wider Mediterranean region. Issues of cultural interaction, hybridization and migration are central to the identity of these islands from early antiquity to the present day. For this reason, Dr. Christophilopoulou applied an archaeological, ecological and social anthropological lens to the surviving evidence. This lecture coincides with the Chak Wing Museum's Island exhibition on Level 3, Tidal Kin Stories from the Pacific. Tidal Kin reveals ancestral stories of Australia's closest island neighbours to comparatively rethink notions of insularity, connectivity and migration across island cultures. So this is a really nice way of continuing that kind of broad island connection. Anastasia's talk tonight is titled Islands and Communities, Stories of Insularity and Maritime Heritage, from the Mediterranean to the Great Ocean. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Anastasia Christophilopoulou.
Thank you very much, Paul, for such a wonderful welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to express my sincere gratitude to the director of the Chau Museum Chak Wing Museum, Michael D'Agostino, Dr. Paul Donnelly, the Deputy Director of the museum, and dear former Cambridge colleague, Dr. Melanie Pitkin, Dr. Craig Barker, and Dr. Candace Richards, Jude Phillips, and other colleagues at the University of Sydney for the very kind invitation. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay my respects to the elders past and present. I extend the respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples here today. This lecture presents the journey of an interdisciplinary research project titled Being an Islander, Art and Identity of the Large Mediterranean Islands, which operates between 2019 and 2023, accompanied by a major exhibition at the Fitzwilliam Museum between February and June this year. The entire project pointed in a sorry. Okay. Yes, sorry. The entire project and its major outputs, research, public engagement program, exhibition, and documentary focused on tracing insular identities of the large islands of the Mediterranean, particularly Cyprus, Crete, and Sardinia. We selected these islands as they are notable for their size and for having borne witness to strong indigenous cultural traditions. They have demonstrated complex transitions between prehistoric to historic cultures and significant restructuring of their social and political systems, tied in various ways to widened developments in the Mediterranean region. The project was conceived in 2018 with research clusters encompassing insular and Mediterranean archaeology, social and visual anthropology, archaeological analysis, a large public engagement project, in collaboration with the diasporic communities of Cyprus, Greece, and Italy in the United Kingdom, and the inclusion of contemporary art displays, installations, and performances. The exhibition Islanders, the Making of the Mediterranean, that took place at the Fitzwilliam Museum, and the production of an award-winning documentary. All the above outputs explore how insularity affected and shaped cultural identity using the examples of Crete, Cyprus, and Sardinia, and provide a platform to debate cultural evolution on the islands as opposed to their surrounding mainland. Issues of cultural interaction, hybridization, and migration are also central to the identity of these islands from early antiquity to the present day. For this reason, in our research, we also applied an archaeological, ecological, and social anthropological lens to the surviving evidence. Through the medium of the large exhibition and the documentary, we extended our discourse beyond the topic of the ancient Mediterranean, incorporating the current perceptions of and discourses about island versus mainland cultural identities, for example, including Britain's own debated island identity. I would like to offer now a reappraisal of the projects and the exhibition's ideas and major strands of activity, as well as a review of our methodologies under the framework of interdisciplinarity. I will present some case studies from our research, public engagement, and exhibition experience, and question the value of a project such as Being an Islander in supporting the roles of museums today. I would also like to share some of our experiences with a public engagement program, a program we devised and implemented with the diasporic communities of the islands of Cyprus, Crete, and Sardinia, and which is still taking place across the United Kingdom and internationally. But let us first consider the core ideas of the project. Throughout history, islands have been treated as distinct places, unlike mainland and continental masses. But are islands inherently different from mainlands? Historically, in the Mediterranean, some islands rose to the role of mini-continents due to their size and economic and political importance. Ancient Greeks, for example, considered Sicily a continent. Likewise, the large Mediterranean islands of Crete, Cyprus, and Sardinia were often given a special status due to their size, as they occupy an intermediate position between small island worlds, such as the Aegean Islands, their network, and their surrounding mainlands. However, belonging to and being of an island has been romanticized and associated with otherness. Islands have often been deemed to have different histories from the mainland and have been associated with more isolated social, cultural, and economic episodes. Yet, connection is an important part of island life, since the sea can be a linking rather than a dividing body, and one can also apply that into thinking into the history of Australia and the Pacific Islands, motivating and maintaining informal and formal connections with other islands and the mainland. One of our key objects that you see today in the Cambridge exhibition, a final Bronze Age, early Iron Age model of a bronze boat from Oroli in Sardinia, gives a unique example of the importance of seafaring, trade, and communication of the large islands of the Mediterranean, developed during the Bronze Age and beyond, and how these practices are symbolically reflected in the creation of material culture. The drawing of a dolphin on a naturally curving rock, together with a short inscription in Greek from the Fitzwilliam Museum's collections, originally from Erymoupolis in South Crete, dated around 520 BC, reveals the special bond islanders had with the sea, also heavily represented in Greek art and myth. Across our dynamic project team, we understand identity, art, and cultural expression in the islands as a dynamic interplay shaped by social and historical episodes rather than geography. Objects from the island's early history, such as the unusual double figurine from the Chalcolithic site of Salamiou Anefani in Cyprus, representing two divinities joined to form a cross, show the imaginative power of these active cultural choices. The same can be said of much later iconic objects, such as the statue of Aphrodite and Adiomene, again as a loan from the Cyprus Department of Antiquities, dated around 300 BC, a sculptural type showing the birth of the goddess from the sea that had a long influence on ancient and later art and became the symbol of Cyprus's ancient connection to Aphrodite during the rise of the island's tourist industry in the 1960s. Being an islander can be a physical or imagined concept, yet inhabitants of the same island might not have shared the same type of identity. Rather, island identities might have shifted depending on daily lives and experiences, as well as connections beyond the immediate surroundings. Objects such as the model of a quadrilla from the sanctuary of Agia Irini in Cyprus speak of periods where the islands were much more fragmented in social and political terms and divided into seven city kingdoms. And while the inhabitants of each of these kingdoms would identify and associate with a common island-wide identity of the Cypriots, the Kypri, at the same time they would reveal local community-driven identities. In Sardinia, during the late Bronze Age, at the height of the Nuragic period, communities shared a common sense of identity based on the repetition of island-wide architecture practices and lifeways. The Nuragic culture of Sardinia lasted between around 1800 BC, the Middle Bronze Age of the island, up to the Roman colonization of the island, around 238 BC. During its heyday, communities of the Nuragi culture shared the distinctive period of architectural construction, megalithic stone towers called Nuragi. Archaeologists estimate that over 10,000 Nuragi once existed throughout Sardinia, although now only a few thousand survive. Nuragi communities also shared common types of tomb architecture and cult places, as well as ceramic styles, agricultural and food processing equipment, and household objects. These all testify to a great interaction among Nuragi communities, which probably also include trade, intermarriage, and shared rituals. However, identity was a product of social choices, and Nuragic people would have constantly renegotiated their self-perception, their interactions with the Sardinian landscape, and others within it. Ultimately, we regard identity as a form of social expression, one's sense of belonging to a group based on similarities and differences. Our project case studies and the material culture presented in this project reveal that being an islander is a highly fluid state of being, whether consciously or not, both in the past and the present. It is perhaps for these reasons that I see a lot of connections between this project and the exhibition that the Chau Chak Wing Museum currently celebrates, Tidal Kin, Stories from the Pacific. Tidal Kin reveals ancestral stories of Australia's closest island neighbors and comparatively rethinks notions of insularity, connectivity, and migration across island cultures, such as just as being an islander investigates shifting cultural identities of the Mediterranean islands, shaped by millennia-long episodes of interaction, migration, and colonizations. Both projects are asking those questions through material culture, but also surviving immaterial culture, and aim to reclaim stories of past community and individual identities in the present day. It is the above parameters, the complexity and variability of cultural identity, that led our group to establish a broad diachronic scope for the project, a multiscalar approach to human interaction within continental and island environments, and the application of integrative analytical approach. Our research, as well as subsequent exhibition themes and sections, integrate findings from scientific fields within archaeology, such as ceramic studies, archaeobotany, archaeometallurgy, and the methodological approaches and findings from social anthropology, ethnography, visual anthropology, and documentary studies. Both our research work and our corresponding public engagement program also engage works of contemporary artists whose creations contemplate what belonging to an island is. The exhibition and research confront the perception that being an islander is a distinctive attribute or a set of well-defined characteristics. Through key artifacts and interactive installations, we make a case for thinking about the Mediterranean regions surrounding this dynamic body of water in terms of connectivity and mobility, rather than through the entrenched disciplinary divides and modern political boundaries. We operated 4 research clusters, as you can see here, and these are just some of the names of our amazing researchers and collaborators. The first cluster worked in the analysis of archaeological objects, mostly in metal, and included scientific conservation, analytical scientists, and collaborators both in the United Kingdom and in Cyprus. The second cluster worked on the concepts of mobility and connectivity. This also included the opportunity for 2 PhD students to complete their PhD fully funded by the project and explore this dimension as part of the project's aims in the last 4 years. A special group which created amazing installations and performances, worked on the concept of insularity through applications in contemporary art, and the work of this group continues now into several galleries in London. And we're really proud that they have established their own trajectory developing from the project. And another group who again still works today is a collaboration between the University of Cambridge and the Cyprus Institute, and works on investigating ancient food practices and food consumption. So I would like to stand now and explain why we think this project in a way was run in a different way. The 5 main themes of the exhibition, the narrative and the choice of objects, were all part of a long process of fruitful collaboration and exchange between the key lenders, the Department of Antiquities of Cyprus, the 3 museums of Crete, Heraklion, Rethymnon, and Chania, and the National Archaeological Museum of Cagliari in Sardinia. Many of the museum directors, curators, and researchers, as well as archaeological excavators and officers, and that contributed to it, are not just contributors to the exhibition, but also active researchers to the project. And I would like to particularly thank Dr. Despopilidis, Dr. Ephichia Zachariou, Dr. Francesco Muscolino, Dr. Georgia Flouda, Dr. Kostis Christakis for their input and support and contributions throughout the course of the project. It is also interesting to think that the process and methodology, what this really means for contemporary museum practice, also practice within the Mediterranean archaeology discipline. To our team, this was an active choice on decolonizing museum practice. Being an islander is a project shaped by the active protagonists in the lands we included in our research, the field archaeologists and museum professionals in the 3 islands, but also the community members, their diasporic and descendant communities, and their contemporary artists. And this is a picture of all of our team. We think that this aspect of it contributed to being different, and this was reflected in the many positive reviews this exhibition received in the past 4 months, many emphasizing on the nature of the collaborative aspect and the agency of the local protagonists in Sardinia, Cyprus, and Crete. So I'd like to show you a little bit more. This is some of our press results. So thinking about the major themes of both project and exhibition, one of them was an aim to reframe mobility and migration as one of the defining characteristics of the ancient Mediterranean insular societies. While the intensity of mobility might have varied through time and space, and not all members of any particular community and island may have shared equally on it, mobility and the connectivity it engendered endowed the region with its characteristics. Contributors to the project expand on the notions of mobility and connectivity with specific temporal and geographical case studies from the 3 islands, arguing that both mobility and connectivity are important features of island life, motivating and maintaining informal and formal connections. We also worked on the concept of migration in the longue durée. Whether we consider it as from an island or a mainland perspective, the theme of migration in archaeology remains divisive and elusive. In fact, it remains divisive in other disciplines as well, whether we examine it as a phenomenon in an organized and substantial way, or whether we observe it in its Brownian motion, borrowing the term from the study of population motions in sociology. No matter its definition, migration remains still today a crucial characteristic of both ancient and modern worlds. Today, migration is a defining global issue, and documenting it requires huge amounts of quantitative and qualitative aspects, many of them needing to be interdisciplinary in nature. Recent evidence of large-scale migration shows that when these flows are undocumented, it is very hard to prove that they happened when the transition is over, as they leave very little material culture. So our contribution to this field lies in bringing together both ancient and contemporary examples of migration, both in our research and in the exhibition space. The second cluster we worked on concerns itself with a study of metal objects dating from the Middle Bronze Age to the beginning of the Classical period, as case studies for understanding island life and cultural identities of the 3 Mediterranean islands. Cyprus, Crete, and Sardinia have important metallurgical histories, which, despite having been a particular popular subject of archaeological research, have never been investigated diachronically in the way this project has done, nor explicitly in relation to insular identities. Scholarship of ancient metallurgy has focused on identification of sources, centers of production and innovation, the reconstruction of trade networks and modes of transition, and provides a rich body of evidence to explore. While both Cyprus and Sardinia had rich metal sources exploited in antiquity, Crete had no significant sources and thus possessed a very different metallurgical trajectory. Objects forged from various metals, primarily bronze, copper, iron, gold, and silver, presented an important part of life of ancient communities on all 3 islands, and include vessels, weapons, tools, symbolic and cult objects, jewelry, and coins. Being an islander exhibition, featured primarily objects found in Cyprus and Sardinia, and research and analysis was conducted between 2020 and 2023 by our colleagues, Julie Dawson, Susie Pancaldo, Emma Bauzita, supported by Professor Marcos Martinon Torres, using a combination of non-invasive and invasive quantitative methods, as well as the qualitative analysis of elemental and microstructural characterization. Their work included questions such as whether a connection exists between island identities, metallurgical practices, and the use of metals in everyday life and as part of funerary culture. And also whether we can see different island identities represented when we look at metals and metallurgical practices from the three islands. One of our key objects, the Cypro-archaic sword that we analyzed in Cambridge for a long time and presented the results of this analysis as well as the CT scans that recreate how the object was formed in antiquity during the exhibition. Of central node within our project was also how islanders construct, perceive, and maintain their built environment. How did they choose where to live, and what environmental, social, and economic factors went into the decisions to build a settlement or relocate it to a different site in a subsequent period? In this section, we were very interested to illustrate the changing patterns of human interaction within their physical environment from prehistoric into historic periods in all of the three islands. Through specific examples, in Cyprus, Crete, and Sardinia, we wanted to clarify the ways in which those societies balanced landscape, natural resources, and the needs of their associated social groups, as well as the impact these relationships had in shaping and reshaping the built environment and in establishing territoriality. We are also very interested to look at the interaction between the built environment and the concepts of memory and time in an island, a relatively new field in study in archaeology, but especially relevant to the study of islands. So we encountered many paradigms of built environment and specific monuments that, although maybe distant culturally, have made conscious decisions to be reused, repaired, and reconstructed in terms of monuments and settlements. During the filming of our documentary on the island of Sifnos, we spent considerable time exploring the concept of meta-use and the life cycle of an ancient settlement and of its symbolic reuse after the end of its inaugural phase. Several emblematic burial assemblages presented in the exhibition as loans gave evidence to other aspects of island identity. For example, a Middle Minoan 3 larnax from the Pahia Amos cemetery in East Crete, and a Middle Minoan burial pithos from the cemetery of Fougaras, again in East Crete, both on loan from the Ministry of Culture of Greece. A group of Bronze Age burial assemblages from the early Middle Bronze Age cemeteries of Cyprus, as well as an Iron Age burial assemblage from Paphos in Cyprus, on loan from the Department of Antiquities of Cyprus. You can see these are the loans from Crete. The last node of our research was a reassessment of island food practices, including cultivation, consumption, and ritual practices. Before the 1990s, narratives of ancient diets, food preparation, and consumption were limited to the social content of food and drink vessels. However, in the past two decades, scientific disciplines within archaeology produced an immense amount of data and information for understanding of consumption in antiquity and helped answer questions about ancient diets. Unfortunately, very little of this discourse has influenced exhibition narratives today or permanent museum exhibits. So what we wanted to do was to reverse this and to fill the gap by addressing ancient civilization and consumption practices, ancient cultivation and consumption practices as an important socioeconomic aspect of the study of antiquity and the archaeology of the Mediterranean islands. In this section that we developed as a result of this research for the exhibition, in collaboration with Dr. Ervin Margaritis of the Cyprus Institute, we presented material related with the preparation and consumption of foods, including material testifying to the symbolic practices and behaviors in all of these three islands. So here you can see a summary of all the major themes that we discussed both as part of the research project and the exhibition. But in order to make the reality of narrating island identity more approachable and much more interactive and inclusive for our public, which is again was a really important aim of our work, we also worked with another group of pioneering researchers in Cyprus who lead the virtual reality laboratories of the Cyprus Institute. So with them, we developed a virtual reality application of the archaeological site of Chirokitia, which was designed in order to simulate a 3D environment and its current structure based on archaeological data. The application allows the participants to virtually navigate through the archaeological site and encounter information about particular aspects, landscape, buildings, and objects. And the interactive application has been assessed for the learning performance of its users and their interest for the topic by a team of experts, demonstrating a significant improvement in learning outcomes, underlying its effectiveness as a teaching tool also for museum and cultural heritage purposes. The feedback from the application was very positive, and the installation was, after the exhibition, moved to the premises of the Cyprus High Commission in London, where it was shown for 4 months and attracted more than 5,000 visitors. These are visitors who go to the consular office in order to attend the consular business. But with that, they were also able to live in the recreation of a virtual environment, Neolithic village in Chirokitia. So we thought it was a win-win, together with getting their passport. So now, before I tire you too much, I would like to turn to some aspects of our public engagement program. For many of us, this was the most creative and the most rewarding part of the project. Public engagement and advocacy of the diverse groups that make the Being an Islander project was at the heart of our practice from the beginning. Our program rethinks the major research themes that transcend the project, and such as insularity, mobility, materiality, migration, accessibility to heritage, but also the colonial practice within the discipline of Mediterranean archaeology. And we invested in a practice and community system, as well as aspects of co-creation, sensory experience, and translating this into a dialogue, active representation of individuals and communities. Contemporary art projects and performances, filmmaking, and co-curated content took a leading role in this project. The engagement with the major themes of the project was not driven only by research teams, but it was informed, shaped, and debated together with our numerous island communities in Greece, Cyprus, and beyond, and in Italy, as well as the diverse diasporic communities of these lands in the United Kingdom, the queer community as well, and the artists inspired by the past of these large Mediterranean islands. So what we wanted to do as a result of that was to make the collections, objects, and their histories relevant to what matters to all of us today, whether that might be the provenance of the objects and the way they were acquired, or the context of their archaeological discovery, as well as their stories, as well as how their histories navigated throughout different institutions. As a community of researchers and practitioners, we strive for the project to lead to the creation of innovative, immersive, and groundbreaking exhibitions and installations, ones that also ask difficult questions about the past of these objects. And we don't rely on just the curators and researchers to answer them, ones that engage our diverse audiences to their interpretations. I'd like to show you just one example of a project that our learning team led with a number of schools of the region of Cambridge. Particularly for those of you who have visited Cambridge, you might know that on a radius of 5 kilometers outside Cambridge is a completely different social and economic reality. This is the so-called Fenland. There are very different conditions there than the inner city of Cambridge. So we worked with schools of these more deprived areas into bringing a project of teaching sign language to school children who attend normal state schools. And this then created a film that was used by the schools who are taught exclusively in sign language. I'd like to show you a little bit what they did.
Dionysus and the Pirates. Dionysus is the god of wine. He is sailing on his boat. He was wearing great and fluffy clothes. The pirates jumped on board to capture him.
Okay, I'll stop here because it's quite long, but I think you understand the concept of it. It was a very successful little project, and this project now enables our learning teams to improve their practice in working with this audience group, and we plan to disseminate our findings to the wider museum learning sector as we go on with closing the project. Object handling session for families, free of charge, of course, and sessions were led also at the museum, attended by families and children with children under the age of 12, and participants were also able to handle replicas of pottery and items of the Islanders exhibition that we created specifically out of the loans to explore the exhibition's themes and discover how objects were made and used, and learn about the communities and people that created them. A long commitment, both in terms of research and public engagement, that had excellent results and was received so enthusiastically by the communities that we present. So one of the commitments that we received was so enthusiastically was the Being an Islander documentary. This is just part of the lectures that we presented in all three countries, Greece, Italy, and Cyprus, throughout the formation of the project. And we hosted one key lecture every year of the running of the project in Cambridge by a leading scholar in Cyprus, Crete, and Sardinia, in order to hear of new excavations and results in the islands. So on the documentary, this was a strange type of project because, as you know, museums don't rarely produce documentaries, and when they do, they tend to be monodisciplinary or designed to accompany an exhibition. This was not designed to accompany our exhibition. It was an idea that was conceived as an interdisciplinary research and engagement project that greatly extended the original core questions of the project. The documentary investigated the ideas of insularity, mobility, and diachronic human presence in the Aegean, using the case of Sifnos, a fourth island in the Cyclades, as a research model. It employed methodology from the fields of visual anthropology, sensory archaeology, and anthropology, as well as experimental archaeology, an ethnographic approach to island studies. The content interweaved researchers and a variety of community members of Sifnos answering the same key questions. What does it mean to be an islander? What role does a natural environment and the island's resources play in the shaping of island life and culture? How important is immaterial culture and how it is manifested in the island setting? But most importantly, this interweaving and exchange of opinions, experiences, and ways of life and ways of answering these questions between the researchers and the community group allowed for natural interaction of the two groups, participation of the community to the research aims, and common shaping of the documentary's outcomes. The island community participants are not just the interviewees, as was all the practice in documentary studies. They are equally inquirers and influence of the research outcomes. So the research team as well of the documentary had the chance to engage with the current everyday challenges and struggles of the island life, such as issues of sustainability and environmental change, concerns on the preservation and documentation of the island's heritage, as well as its immaterial culture. So we were really grateful to the influencer, producer, and lead researcher of the documentary, Dr. Dimitrios Bouras, who led the idea of bringing this diverse group together, as well as his tireless work into disseminating after the end of the production. So far, the documentary has won 7 awards, 4 awards, and 4 awards and 3 distinctions in international festivals across the UK, Italy, Greece, yes, the UK, Italy, and Greece. And we continue to provide it free of charge to all the communities who would like to see it. Being an islander also examined the relationship between art and archaeology and explored the notions of islands as places that encourage creativity. Through various research by products and installations, we questioned our traditional approach to ancient visual culture, and we sought alternative interpretations to archaeological material and heritage. We'll come back to it, sorry. This was the theme of the document. Contemporary artists from the 3 Mediterranean islands included in the project have been invited to respond to the exhibition by creating art installations. Supported by the Fitzwilliam Museum's core teams, visual artist Yorgos Petru presented his project called The Dust and Butterflies, an experimental art film that celebrated the creative histories to emerge from the MENA region, past and present. Yorgos works on the theme of the islands as a spatial figure, articulating contradictory conceptions of the world, but also on the self and the body as an insular, as an island and fragmentation, and as a metaphor for political renewal. Working with 4 queer migrants from Cyprus, Lebanon, Palestine, and Egypt, Petru devised the performance to camera, responding to the Fitzwilliam Museum's collections of artifacts from the same region. The performers recited poetry and performed movements in the gallery space, transforming the museum into a site of creativity and celebration. Petru filmed the performance over 2 days and created a short film that celebrates the interconnectivity and complexity of life as a migrant in the UK from a uniquely queer and artistic perspective, grounded in the historical context that the museum provides. The resultant film was screened in art galleries in London and will also be screened in Cambridge in early 2024. This is part of the filming at the museum. We also implemented the creation of a project called Diasporic Words, which involved 5 creative commissions and a community-led exhibition at the Cyprus High Commission in London. We worked on this project as a collaboration between the Embassy of Greece in London and the Cyprus High Commission. This project linked stories of ancient material culture to concepts of modern island identity and included the launch of a call of creative commissions during February to May 2022. As well as a collaboration between the Universities of Cambridge and Royal Holloway, as well as the 2 embassies of Greece and Cyprus in London. On the basis of this idea, we organized the exhibition Creating Diasporic Words, where projects selected for display included collaborations between academics and artists that explore diachronic identities, cultures, politics, and ways of being. Here you see some photos from the opening of the exhibition. It's lasted 3 months. This year, 2023, we also worked together on the delivery of an engagement program for refugees funded by the Niarchos Foundation. This took place on the island of Samos, currently home to one of the largest facilities of refugees in Greece. we were in touch with the camp's administrator and 3 of the NGOs that support learning and well-being and provide legal help to recently arrived immigrants and refugees prior in the island of Samos. While on Samos, we participated in learning sessions delivered by the NGOs. Their names are Movement on the Ground and the Samos Volunteers, located just outside the formal refugee camp. Here, young refugees can attend daily English lessons and courses that help them prepare to apply to university degrees in Europe and programs specially created for refugees, as well as general well-being activities. What you see is the tents where the NGOs are being hosted, because this is facilities that are outside the formal camp. So people have to walk every day from the formal camp to these NGOs, and we worked in collaboration with both the authorities and the NGOs. Our team on the museum focused on sessions. We spent 4 weeks there this summer on sessions for the young refugees, informing them about our work in Cambridge, but also we discussed issues such as migration and human movement from the antiquity to today, to the Aegean and Italy to Europe, presenting pictures of our work and artifacts that relate with migration in the exhibition. And the young people attending these sessions, who were mostly from Palestine, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, were particularly interested in the pictures of boats from the exhibition and shared their own stories of the difficult journey across the Aegean Sea from Turkey. These stories were incredibly moving. Together with us, there was another group of colleagues from Cambridge led by Dr. Tuba Basaran, who is the director of the Center for Global Human Movement in Cambridge, and they provided legal help supporting the NGOs that help the refugees to register their presence on the moment they arrive on the island. The pictures you see are from the learning sessions and the well-being sessions that were delivered in Samos, one of the organizations. This is in the middle of the island, so it's quite far away from the current settlements. And the final one, as you see, so this is a picture taken right in front of our hotel at 6 o'clock in the morning when we were preparing to leave the island. And as you can see, we woke up and saw that in the middle of the night, 2 boats have arrived as one of them, 15 people, including a number of babies. So for us, that was a stark reminder that talking about these themes is not just something about beautiful ancient objects, but it is a matter that affects all of us, and also something that needs to extend to what the role of museums should be today. Back in Cambridge, we continue to deliver engagement sessions on the theme of migration with an international workshop across the Fitzwilliam Museum and the Sociology Department. And we're hoping to have a number of learning sessions for local schools on the theme of migration in Europe diachronically. So I hope that this is part of the workshop that happened in Cambridge very recently. So I hope that these examples and actions of the project have given you a flavor of our research and engagement strategy as it was developed across the last 4 years of the project based on the island cultures we investigated in the Mediterranean, the landscapes, material and immaterial heritage, and their social phenomena in the longue durée. I hope it has become apparent that what drives these engagement actions of the project is our interaction with the diverse groups that make the Being an Islander community. All our major research themes, insularity, mobility, materiality, migration, have been rethought with our community of artists and young people, students, and emerging researchers. The queer community in particular, but also largely communities and groups of islanders themselves in Cyprus, Crete, Sardinia, Sifnos, and Samos. Contemporary art projects and performances also greatly contributed to this goal. So if we return to the work of David Lowenthal, as well as Wilsoni Hereniko, who are 2 of the leading researchers that really inspired us in the beginning of this project, who both saw that the island cultures investigating social phenomena in the longue durée, and they also emphasized that islanders' cultures and identities are always in a state of becoming, a journey in which we never arrive. Cultural identity becomes a process, not a product. Through the example of this project, we believe we offered a perspective on history that extends deep into the past, focusing on the long-standing and slowly changing relationships between people and the world of the Mediterranean islands and their surrounding continents. What we aim to suggest is that exhibitions and museum projects can include this discourse. This is an exciting time for museums and cultural institutions, but indeed also a time of great change and reappraisal of our goals and ambitions. The role of cultural heritage collections in promoting social cohesion and a sense of belonging is very important and should be fostered. Designing projects, exhibitions, and displays in a way that integrates community input, engagement, and on many occasions, co-creation and co-curation needs to be at the heart of every institution's policy, and indeed a defining factor of national and international heritage policy. We hope that this project has contributed a little bit towards this goal. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Stavros Paspalas, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Australian Archaeological Institute at Athens. And the Chak Museum has done me the great honor this evening of asking me to deliver the vote of thanks to our speaker, Dr. Christophilopoulou. And I can only say that it's a great pleasure to do so. Our speaker has unpacked for us not only what it means both in the past, but diachronically, to be an islander in the Mediterranean. But the finds of Dr. Christophilopoulou and her colleagues no doubt have application, as she briefly mentioned, to the Pacific, but to other island groups, if one thinks of the Caribbean or of the archipelagos immediately to Australia's north. Clearly, the project is not simply restricted to the Mediterranean, though that's where the focus clearly lies. Those of you who know me will know that I spend as much time as I possibly can on Mediterranean islands, and not only for recreational purposes. I've been fortunate enough to work on two major programs, on Andros with my colleagues, Paul Donnelly from this very museum and Leslie Beaumont from the Department of Archaeology here, and on Kythera, again with colleagues, Professor Timothy Gregory, lately of the University of Ohio, and my colleague at the Institute, Dr. Lita Georgopoulou Gregory. I have come away this evening vastly enriched by what we just heard and how many of these concepts that Dr. Christophilopoulou has just expounded to us can be applied to our projects and to many others as well. What our speaker presented to us was the cutting edge of archaeology incorporating what the discipline has been for the last century plus, but also bringing to the fore new techniques and new horizons. And this, I think, is one of the major walkways that I would at least leave the this evening with. We will also learn from both the exhibition, and I believe a catalogue is being prepared for it, and for all the other work which will be generated by this program on such topics as Dr. Christophilopoulou mentioned, the environment of these islands, and well, I can think of at Zagora, we're particularly interested in food production, storage, and consumption, for instance. But what really tugged at my heart and my interest was the concept of mobility and interconnectivity. Granted, the islands that I deal with are much smaller than Crete, Sardinia, and Cyprus, but there are lessons to be learned. And because I fear that I've probably gone on too long, I'll just leave you with one of my favorite characters from history. I work in the ancient world, but this guy was a village priest on the island of Kythera in the early 19th century. And we're lucky enough to have the chronicle which he wrote. And in 1812, the winter of 1812, he records the terrible winter that the island suffered. But really excitingly, he links that directly with Napoleon's expedition against Russia and the destruction of his grand army. And I'm not just raising this point to be cinematographically relevant, but it brilliantly, I think, shows the interconnectivity that islands can have. Of course, circumstances change through history, and channels of interconnectivity change as well. But here, who would have thought that a village priest, barely literate, on an inland village on the western side of Kythera, would be aware of Napoleon's invasion. And this is where it comes back full circle, because here we have this guy, he's obviously interconnected through some channels with the wider world. But I suspect that his real interest, or well, I'll rephrase that, where his interest derives from in Napoleon, where it derives from, is the fact that his island and the Ionian Islands to the northwest had very recently been Venetian held. Then the French came, then there was a Russo-Turkish bizarre condominium, and then whereas the French were before revolutionary, then the Imperial French came. And so he's knitting these wider events in the world around him to his own community. And I'm sure that similar stories will come out from your investigation and investigations and that of your colleagues, Dr. Christophilopoulou. So I've been asked to remind everybody that you're invited downstairs for some light refreshments, where you'll have the opportunities to ask our speaker questions on her presentation. And I'd just simply like to invite you all to thank Dr. Christophilopoulou, not only for coming out to Australia, but for presenting us with such a grand overview of this multifaceted project. So thank you very, very much.